Let's talk to Danny Shaw, police and crime commentator, former advisor to Yvette Cooper. Danny, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Hi.
I think we'll get to the lags coming out of prison and getting into Rolls-Royces perhaps in a minute. But let's talk first of all about Chris Kaba and the stories on the front pages this morning. The Sun has the story which we learned about yesterday. Kaba's gang have put a £10,000 bounty on the head of police officer Sergeant Martyn Blake. Now, I mean, I seem to remember there was an awful lot of pressure on the police to reveal Martyn Blake's name. Do you think they're regretting that now?
Well, it wasn't the police who revealed his name. It was on the orders of a judge early on in the trial process after Martyn Blake had been charged. There was an application by members of the media in the interest of open justice and reporting his name to be disclosed. And the judge gave it quite a long time of consideration, actually made his decision and then sort of put an embargo on it, if you like. So it wasn't for several months after he'd made his decision that the name was revealed, to give time to the Metropolitan Police and to Martyn Blake to put any protective measures in place and any other arrangements. I mean, my own view, Mike, as a journalist, who's covered a lot of court cases and doesn't really like reporting restrictions because I think that does inhibit the freedom of the press, is that I think it's right that a defendant in a murder trial should be identified and should be named. I mean, the very, very exceptional circumstances, obviously, apart from under 18-year-olds who have, there's a statutory prohibition on naming them, very, very exceptional circumstances. The judge looked at it very closely and he didn't think that it reached that threshold. I just think...
Well, he was wrong then, wasn't he?
I beg your pardon.
Don't you think he was wrong in this case, because now the guy's living in fear of his life and he's in hiding?
Well, that's a report that's in one of the newspapers. We don't know the exact details of that. All I would say is that once you go...
Well, the reports in the newspapers tend to be correct, I think, Danny, and I would imagine that it's not out of the question for a man like this to have a gang-related bounty put on the head of the person that shot him. Well, we're not dealing with, kindergarten babies here. We're dealing with gangsters who deal in drugs and who go around shooting people. Yeah,
but I was in court when the judge made his ruling, and the judge had the information from the Metropolitan Police and others at that time. Now, things may have changed since then. It's quite possible.
What I'm saying here, Danny, is the point about retrospective analysis of what happens in the world is that you learn lessons. We're always being told that you learn lessons, right? In retrospect, this looks like it was a wrong decision, doesn't it? Surely.
Mike, it may have been a wrong decision, but I also think it's, if you let me finish, I also think it's a very dangerous road you go down when you start allowing defendants in very serious criminal cases, and we can get on to whether he should...
No, I don't agree with you. No, this is a very unusual case. These cases don't come up very often, as you well know.
No, they don't. They only come up, probably once every 5 years or something like that, if that.
Not even.
If you get into a situation whereby... actually, police officers on trial is actually quite a common thing these days. Police officers on trial for...
Yeah, usually because they've committed some kind of crime.
Exactly. But the point is, Mike, that once you get into a situation where you allow a defendant not to be named, I'm sure you believe in the freedom of the press and the right of reporters to report what they can in open court.
No, of course I do.
You get down a slippery slope.
Of course I do, but I think the problem that we have here, Danny, is that people are always worried about the slippery slope, and people, instead of being actually forensic about an individual case where you're dealing with gangsters. And here's another one for you, because the court also knew about the fact that this guy was a gangster, but they decided to keep that from the public gaze, which seems a little bit inconsistent to me.
No, I think that's the right decision.
So how is it right to keep secret...
Okay, well, hang on.
Let me ask you the question first. How is it right to keep very important details about a criminal history of a very dangerous man in a murder trial where somebody's life is literally at stake, and yet you don't find it necessary to withhold the information from the public of the guy who's being accused of the murder?
Okay, right. Well, they're two completely different things.
No, they're not.
Okay, Mike, if you want me to come on the show and answer your questions, I'll do it.
Well, you can answer the questions if you answer them, but I don't need a lecture. I don't need a lecture in journalism from you, Danny. I've been doing this a lot longer than you have. So just answer the question, all right?
Right. Okay. The first thing is I've addressed the point about why Martyn Blake was named. That was a decision that was made by the judge.
Yes, you've already said that. So let's move on to the next bit.
Right. The next bit is that the judge, faced with an application to disclose the criminal background of Chris Kaba and the awful criminal record he's got and his involvement in gangs and violence and all the rest of it. And Martyn Blake's defence wanted that information to be put before the jury. The judge considered it and he decided that it was not relevant because at the moment that Martyn Blake opened fire and took the shot, all he knew about the incident was that the Audi was linked to a firearms incident the previous night. He didn't know who was behind the wheel. He didn't know it was Chris Kaba. So, and the important point about this case was that it turned on the perception, Martyn Blake's perception and his fear and his belief that he and his colleagues were under threat. And his knowledge about Chris Kaba and his record just didn't come into it at all. It wasn't relevant. And that's why the judge made the decision not to put those details before the jury. The restrictions have now been lifted.
But the result of that, the result of all of that, but the restrictions were only lifted because once again an application was made to have them lifted, right? So they wouldn't have been lifted necessarily.
Would have been lifted, automatically lifted, as you know.
That's not true, actually, because I can tell you, I know why they were lifted because we were involved in it yesterday. So don't talk to me about what you know and what I don't know. The bottom line is that in retrospect, it seems to me that there was an inconsistency. If you don't agree, that's fine. That's your opinion. Thanks very much indeed. So